Good morning, Europe. It's Thursday, the 23rd of December. Let's take a look at the latest headlines.
Blanket booster programs are likely to prolong the pandemic rather than ending it.
No country can boost its way out of the pandemic, the WHO says, as it warns of the dangers of vaccine inequity. With Omicron infections rising across Europe, Belgium and Spain issue fresh advice on how to celebrate Christmas as safely as possible. And EU leaders call for a return to the negotiating table over tensions between Russia and Ukraine, insisting diplomacy is key. No country can boost its way out of the pandemic. This was the stark warning from the Director General of the World Health Organization as further countries battle the Omicron variant. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus acknowledged that vaccine supply is increasing, but access to jabs in lower income countries is still problematic. He added that there were enough vaccines administered globally this year that every country could have inoculated 40% of its population. However, inequality in distribution and hoarding are preventing the pandemic from coming to an end.
While some countries are now rolling out blanket booster programs, only half of WHO's member states have been able to reach the target of vaccinating 40% of their populations by the end of the year because of distortions in global supply. The WHO Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization, or SAGE, is issuing an interim statement on booster doses. SAGE concluded that the focus of immunization must remain on decreasing deaths and severe disease, and expressed concern that blanket booster programs will exacerbate vaccine inequity. About 20% of all vaccine doses administered every day are currently being given as boosters or additional doses. Blanket booster programs are likely to prolong the pandemic rather than ending it.
Vous le voyez, nous avons encore quelques problèmes de connexion.
Nigeria has destroyed some 1 million expired doses of AstraZeneca. The coronavirus vaccines were disposed of at a landfill site in the capital, Abuja. The move comes as the West African nation says it will no longer accept COVID vaccine donations with short shelf lives. While the jab uptake has almost doubled in the West African nation in the last week, only 2% of the population are fully inoculated.
Several EU countries are reimposing COVID-19 restrictions to protect people during Christmas as the Omicron variant spreads around the continent. In Belgium, Prime Minister Alexander De Croo has said that concert halls, cinemas and other venues will have to close from this weekend.
We can celebrate Christmas together, but I remind you to do so with the greatest possible caution. Limit the number of people around the table. Do not gather in large groups. Do a self-test before celebrating Christmas together. Ventilate indoor spaces as much as possible.
In Spain, the mandatory use of face masks outdoors has been reintroduced. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said the army will be helping with vaccination efforts.
The most important measure to tackle this phase of the pandemic is to intensify and accelerate the vaccination process, with the emphasis on the third dose. In order to help the work of health professionals, we will reinforce 150 mobile vaccination teams with members of the armed forces.
But protesters took to the streets of Barcelona to contest the latest measures. They held up banners dismissing the restrictions and vaccines. While in Europe some resist vaccines, in the US, health regulators have approved a COVID pill in the hope to slow down infection rates. Made by Pfizer, the drug, which is expected to be effective against Omicron, has shown promising results with high efficacy and low side effects.
On the Russian border, Ukrainian troops go through maneuvers in preparation for what the country thinks is a coming invasion from the east. Although Russia denies any plans for aggression, Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi suggested a European army would discourage an attack.
What is the deterrence factor the European Union have? We have to reflect about it, because have we missiles, ships, cannons, armies? Not at the moment.
Meanwhile, Germany's new Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, took a more diplomatic stance, saying that sit-down talks were the best way to calm tensions.
I've repeatedly said how important it is that we return to the negotiating table in the Normandy format to ensure that we can avert a further escalation, because this major crisis we are in can only be resolved through dialogue.
In a phone call on Wednesday, Baerbock's sentiments were echoed by the heads of the American and European diplomatic services, Anthony Blinken and Joseph Borrell, who agreed that any possible solution will have to be done through diplomacy. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov remains open for further dialogue. And in a show of support, Poland's Foreign Minister met with his Ukrainian counterpart to discuss the current situation on the Russian border.
The European Commission wants multinational companies to pay a minimum tax of 15%. In line with the agreement at the OECD, the Brussels proposal comes after the global agreement of 137 countries. It will apply to companies with revenues of more than 750 million euros per year and that have a parent company or a subsidiary based in an EU member state.
Minimum taxation will bring additional revenue to EU member states that have seen their tax takes depleted by low-tax jurisdictions. In the medium term, part of this additional revenue will likely decrease as low-tax third countries will increase their tax rates precisely because of the effective mechanism of this Pillar 2.
Ireland, Hungary and Estonia weren't too keen on the agreement at first, as they have low corporation tax rates. For the MEP Paul Tang, it still remains a sensitive issue.
We must realize that there is also a call, for example, from the European Parliament to raise the minimum effective tax rate. That 50% is not enough, that you need to tax capital income at the same rate as labor income. So in that sense, I very much hope for a new round of OECD negotiations in the future that will raise the minimum effective corporate tax rate.
For NGOs, the proposal is unambitious and it might lead to a shortage of EU resources for COVID-19 recovery. The proposal still has to be discussed at the Council and at the Parliament.
For the first time in 4 years, all 4 faces of London's Big Ben will be fully visible to ring in the new year. Scaffolding that has surrounded Elizabeth Tower and the Great Clock for renovation work since 2017 is gradually being removed.
I think it's fantastically important. It's important for the tourist industry, it's important for us. It's an international symbol of democracy. And remember, of course, the bell, Big Ben itself, was the only bell allowed to ring during the Second World War. So that was the sound of liberty and hope.
As the clock strikes midnight on the 31st, the bells will also chime for the last time using a temporary system. The original 11.5-ton Victoria-era mechanism will be put in its original place at the beginning of the year, after it was removed for its protection. The complete restoration is expected to be finished by summer.
That's it for now, but do stay with us as we bring you all the latest from across Europe and beyond. And you can also find more on our website, euronews.com.